And we're back. So, all right. So where were we? I wanted to ask you. Obviously, Americans know. You don't have to. They don't have to be told that we have problems with the current system. I mean, every American, I think, can see there are problems with the economy, with jobs, with corrupt banking, corrupt government. I mean, everybody on every side of every spectrum can see these things. What would you say? Do you think Americans need to know or understand that they don't?
That's an interesting hypothesis you put forth, because in a way I think that was less true even 2 months ago, before the Occupy movement, the 99% movement. So the fact that we are now having
the conversation's changed,
a stronger conversation, the conversation certainly changed. We're all more facile in that conversation with what is the problem? It's inequality. What is a result of that. So kudos to them for that, really. Where so one of my working hypotheses is that we're seeing a convergence of basically angry people in America, right? First you could have said it was the Tea Party, and you could say it's the Occupy movement. At the end of the day, it's not particularly red, it's not necessarily blue, but what they share is anger.
Right.
They share anger that the system isn't working.
Right,
now, if you sort of just get out of bed in the morning and, don't go read some books or talk to your neighbors or don't have a particularly maybe well-formed critique of what's wrong, let alone a vision for what to do about it. But there is a sort of pit of their stomach, intuitive sense that's sweeping the country that something's just broken.
Right.
Now, there are two places where that falls out. So, so some people sort of would say, all right, it's really business, big business, Wall Street, the way our economy works, that's what's broken. Someone would say, it's really government that's broken. Now, I think most actually agree with both. So the sort of, on extremes, they would, but most people think it's both. You talk to Tea Party folks, you talk to Occupy Wall Street folks, they agree. Look, Wall Street is rigged, it's a rigged game, and they own government, which is why government built out. Where the real breakdown then occurs, Bruce, is what you do with that. Because some people, right, and again, I think it sort of crosses partisan lines, some people say, well, the answer is you have to rein in business, and you have to make our economy work for working people and for entrepreneurs.
Right.
And that the only, if not the primary tool for doing that is government regulation, rules, restrictions, putting government back in the hands of people so that government can be a check and a balance to the market.
Right.
Then there are others, again, I think they cross spectrums, but there are others who say no, the solution is actually to less regulation, less government, less restrictions, and to let the market sort of, that in fact the reason that these problems exist is because government has been intervening unfairly in the market. So that's the next step in the conversation, is really parsing that out. I'm a firm believer that it's the former. That, in fact, the reason we're in the predicament we're in is because we deregulated business, we deregulated the finance industry in particular, and let it do whatever the heck it wanted, and it did, and it destroyed us. But we have to have that conversation next as a country, and I think that's it's worth having.
I was thinking about this very thing this morning, because I knew we were going to talk today, and I was thinking, maybe it's just my perception, but that the word regulation is key. Because I was talking to somebody a couple days ago, another guest, and we were talking about that, and she says, well, this is maybe where we differ about regulation and free market and things like that. And I was thinking about this morning. Regulation, it seems to me, might be a word like love. It's not always appropriate. It depends on how it's used. And I think it might be that everybody really agrees, well, not everybody, but the majority agrees, they're just defining the word regulation differently. Because even the most liberty-minded libertarian is for regulation when it comes to breaking up monopolies. So it depends on what you mean by regulation, right? I think that when we talk about corruption, crime and corruption, where it's obvious that it's a corrupt, thievery that's going on, that everybody agrees with that. If you call that regulation, that's enforcement of criminal law, really, is what it should be. So, but you call that regulation, I think everybody agrees with that.
I mean, I do think there's a nomenclature issue here, if you will, and it's sort of in the way I would compare it maybe less to love, more to government, right? That some people hear the word government and they think of the collective, the thing that we all invest in to make sure that our economy, our society, the world around us works fairly, responsibly, and accountably to all of us. Other people hear the word government and they think of that thing I pay for that helps those people, right? It's actually something that's very
like
much
a tax.
removed from you.
Right.
Well, and that's part of, it's interesting because people, poll after poll shows, right, that people support taxes when they believe the things they're getting benefit them.
Yeah,
they don't like taxes when they believe that they're helping other people. Now, of course, the vast majority of our taxes go toward things that actually benefit us all. Roads, public safety, public health, the military, and all these things, right?
Yeah.
But there's this myth in the way that people who are against government have attacked government is by, focusing on the food stamps or the welfare, or the things that sort of help those other people. Of course, letting alone the fact that in this recession, a record number of people are relying on food stamps, including formerly middle-class people. So, there's something about the words and what they mean to people. Regulation has a, sort of tight-fisted, framing to it, right?
Yeah.
Even though, by the way, groups after groups, clusters of small businesses have come out and said that actually regulation is not their problem, and in fact, the fact that the United States regulates some of its industries is what gives us a competitive edge abroad, right? People are going to buy lumber, for instance, from U.S. manufacturers because they know it is free of certain toxins and things. That gives them a competitive edge against non-regulated markets. So bearing that in mind, I actually think talking about safety, safeguards and standards may be the better way to go, because we're really not talking about stopping companies from doing things. What we're talking about is making sure that what they do
ethically
is ethical. It doesn't hurt people. It doesn't. We don't want people to pollute the air.
Exactly.
We've been there. We've done that. We had record asthma. It was bad. Right? And it's not like we don't want them to because we're mean to business. We don't want them to because we don't want our kids getting sick.
That's what I mean by people hear the word regulation, and I think they literally have like a different meaning. It's like I always say, labels and expectations. We talk about relationships. We're going to be, okay, let's say, let's go steady. Well, I'll be your boyfriend. You may be my girlfriend. Then, boyfriends do this and do this and do this and don't do that. Like, we hear a word and we each have a different meaning. So when some people hear regulation, they think standards and safeguards and ethics and things like that. And I think other people hear regulation and they think it means blocking certain markets, preventing people from trading and things like that, which I think is the opposite of what we want. We really want...
No, and those who've attacked sort of government infrastructure as it relates to the private sector have done a very good job of masquerading their concerns about safety, safeguards and standards, masquerading their concerns as concern for small business and little business, where in fact we know that deregulation, that getting rid of all these safeguards and standards, has disproportionately helped big business to get bigger and bigger and bigger while making it harder for small businesses and new businesses to compete. And that is the engine of our economy. Most of our jobs are created by small businesses. It's not, so we know all these things. I think it's both. It's a mixture of people honestly having a different understanding of what it means, and also a lot of disingenuous manipulation of terminology to say, to call it this just to influence people to vote against it or whatever things like that. There's so much manipulation and dishonesty. When you talk about people, a little bit of that going around. So when you talk about government and government and big business, corporations, banking especially. Some people think it's this, some people think it's that. And I say it's inseparable, literally inseparable. Completely incestuous, literally. Like when the regulator's in charge of overseeing this is the former CEO, and he promotes his buddy, then he becomes the regulator, and it's literally they're all in one big bed. People don't, these aren't like the necessarily glamorous things to talk about. It's like, because it's so many layers of possibly boring, tedium. Like, well, who fills out the paperwork that regulates the... But, we learned in the Gulf oil disaster that literally it was big oil company executives who would pencil in the answers on the forms that the government overseers were supposed to fill out, and the government overseers would go over them in pen.
In ink, and then sign up.
Come on. Now, again, you can sort of look at that one of two ways. You can use that to attack government, or you can use that to attack business. And I think the third path, which is where most Americans would fall, and I think are falling right now, as most of the Tea Party and most of Occupy Wall Street as well, the third path is to say no. Look, government can work. The private sector can work.
Yeah.
We're not doing what it takes to make them work and thrive and create prosperity for everyone. We've let them, sort of co-join and be in cahoots to enrich a very, very, very few and screw the vast majority.
Yeah.
We've let it happen on our watch. We're going to stop it now.
Yeah. I think you're right. It seems to me like the bottom line is a big, gigantic mirror that this is putting up in front of all of the American people saying, somebody here is not doing their job. The corporations are doing their job. They're just a machine, like software, to make money. Corporations are not humans. They're obviously not people. Even before that issue, I've always said corporations are just machines. You can't blame a corporation for not having morals and ethics. It's just a machine to make money, and it's doing it really well. It needs to be reined in, like a lawnmower machine with a blade on it. It has to be harnessed and framed and to do its job properly. It's just a machine to make money, and they're doing really well at that. The government, the politicians, well, they're doing really well. They're doing exactly what they're paid to do. They're bought and owned before they even run for election, and we know that. There's just corruption, and that's human nature. It's to be expected if if the system is set up like that.
Yeah.
Who's not doing their job in this picture is the American people. We have felt so powerless for so long. We are realizing like it's time for us to stop being apathetic.
Right.
I mean, and also our attention span. Like you were talking about the detail, the tedium of it. I always say, if you put just one layer of complexity, much less two layers of complexity, people are like, oh, it's too complicated, I don't understand. If it doesn't fit in a tweet, I don't get it. And you know what I mean? Like we don't even remember who won American Idol last season or something. I mean, we have very short attention spans and one layer of complexity and we don't understand.
It was Scotty McCreery.
Who
won American Idol?
Oh, see, I don't know. I don't really watch American Idol much.
Wasn't it? Anyway, I think it was.
I
hope I got that right. No, you're right. I mean, but it's different from saying we can't, right?
Right. We are.
And
yes,
I wouldn't absolve leaders in business either. I mean, there's sort of
Yeah. Well, when they've committed crimes.
It's kind of like saying, well, no, but I just mean even for sort of general ethical standards, right? In other words, there's a sort of reverse of keeping up with the Joneses, which is sort of, going into the gutter with the Joneses, right? So it's sort of, it becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy or reality or whatever, where it's like, oh, well, they're doing
Everyone's
that,
doing
so
it.
I should do that. So meanwhile, it's like, do you blame any individual reality TV show producer for, creating kind of socially destructive junk? Do you
Speaking
just
of a
blame
mob mentality.
Do you blame the zeitgeist? Do you? It's sort of, you can't just say, oh, it's
like
your
the
fault
culture
or
of
it's
Wall
not your
Street.
fault. It's like, right?
It's like the culture of Wall Street. That was their defense. Well, everybody was doing it. They were doing it worse than we were.
Right. And that's half an answer. That's half an answer, right? It becomes ingrained and inculcated in a culture, and individuals are still autonomous and responsible. In fact, in a way, sort of psychologically, it's the equivalent of what we talk about when we talk about the government balancing out market, right? We talk about the collective, right? The greater good, the common good, balancing the individual. So there's individual rights, freedom, autonomy, responsibility, balanced with what is in the greater interest, helping people do what they can't do themselves, helping the community do what no one would do on their own, right? So you sort of balance those interests in the same way you balance individual responsibility for moral behavior with the sort of culture and what the culture allows, permits, endorses, etc.
Right.
So, again, 30 years ago, the highest paid CEOs made about 40 times more than their lowest paid workers on average. Now they make about 300, 400 times more.
Yeah.
Now, is that individual CEO greed? Is it culture? Is it deregulation? It's all of them.
All of the above, yeah.
It's all of them.
Yeah.
And, everybody can kind of point the finger, but it's wrong.
Right.
And, the vast majority of Americans look at something like that and say, that's wrong.
Yeah.
30 times more? Fine. Even
I think I saw
100
a chart,
times
it
more?
was like
Fine, but come on.
Yeah. I think I saw a chart recently. It was like, I think if I remember right, it was like 9 times more in CEO compared to the average worker in Japan. And everything was pretty much single digits until you get right down to the U.S. and there's like 497 times or some crazy number.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that's wrong, and especially when they get a massive bonus for doing something really criminal and driving the company into the ground and then leave.
Right. Well, and and that's where it's like, wait a second, what?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And others like, good for you, you got away with it.
And again, it's not to demonize. I think sometimes we have black and white conversations in our country right now politically because we're so hyper-partisan and we don't talk about the complicated, messy gray in the middle.
Yeah.
It's not to say that a CEO, running a Wall Street firm or a big business or what, is working hard. Of course they're working hard. I wouldn't want that job. Those are more than full-time jobs. We know it, and they're complicated, and they had to work their way up, and those are hard jobs. Now the question is, how much harder? And I really want to they should switch for a day or something, but how much harder is that person's job than, a single mom who's on her feet all day, restocking at Walmart?
Or their school teachers, or their
but take that person working at Walmart, full-time working at Walmart, you still qualify for welfare and food stamps. So now, do I think that the CEO is working harder? In material terms, they harder, maybe they're more talented, whatever you want to say. Even if you buy all that, which is fair.
Even providing more value and all that.
How much better are they? Are they working? Because in most of those discrepancies, if you're going from Walmart to Wall Street, you're actually talking about, in some cases, a 1,200 time discrepancy, right? The average starting salary for a Walmart worker is about 1,200 times less than, say, Lloyd Blankfein, who runs Goldman Sachs.
Right.
Now, is Lloyd Blankfein really working 1,200 times more? Is he 1,200 times better at what he... really, just contemplate what that would mean. I couldn't work 1,200 times more than I am now. So, that's the conversation that we really need to put in some perspective. And it's the society's fault as well as the individuals.
Right. And then, so there's that. They may be, stealing 1,200 times more money from the American public and the whole wiping out the middle class. Who knows? But then the other thing is just a simple accountability. Even if that were theoretically justifiable, right? To take the money and, when they know the company is going bankrupt, sell all their stock in the last 12 months before they know the company is going bankrupt. That's just like insider trading. It's absolutely criminal. It's just unbelievable that, it actually is believable because, like you said, like I say, government, politicians, Washington are just completely bought and paid for. It's just completely incestuous. We have this concept of separation of church and state, but we don't have any concept of separation of corporation and state and banks, which are the most powerful corporations. And we didn't even get to talk much about one of the things I'm most interested in is the Federal Reserve, which is a private corporation that has this, for some bizarre reason, has this exclusive monopoly to print U.S. money and then loan it back to us at interest. And it's completely private corporation, has no accountability. The government is accountable to the Federal Reserve instead of the other way around. And
well, that's a longer conversation.
Yeah, that's.
But look, there are problems. And this is why you're starting to see, like I said, more voters who are identifying not necessarily as red or blue, but angry.
Yeah,
angry. And they're coming across, and sort of coming out in all different political stripes and varieties and so forth.
Yeah.
The fact is, I just heard this the other day, it blew my mind, that in one day, right, the financial sector is producing almost more, just by trading, just by buying and selling stuff. not even things, right?
Just
buying
digits.
and selling other
Electronic digits,
right? Investing in other people's investments and shorting other people's investments and blah blah blah, are creating more wealth than virtually an entire year's worth of production coming out of our manufacturing sector. The proportion is, or maybe it's 30 times more than but it's.
I heard it was
like
something like 40% of our GNP was financial services.
Exactly. On top of that, not only are these income discrepancies huge, right, but all of our nation's quote-unquote wealth, which incidentally, the making of which is what bankrupt our economy, bankrupt our housing market, but all of that isn't even making anything.
Right.
They're not actually
shuffling digits in a computer.
It's not. They're not producing things. They're not producing ideas. They're not producing. No, they're not. And I'll be damned. I think America's better than that. And I think Americans are waking up and saying, "Hey, wait, we're better than that too. We're not going to be a country run by, a few dozen people that
Right.
benefits 400 people and shafts everyone else.
It's just modern, high-tech. We're so sophisticated at coming up with new ways of doing things and so innovative. We've come up with the most brilliant scheme for modern electronic slavery by shuffling digits in computers and having the masses be poor and in debt. And we use debt as a slavery mechanism.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite go that far. I'm always very cautious about slavery metaphors because, really, there's
It's not-
slavery is slavery.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, like
Yeah.
the subjugation of African Americans is
Right.
actual indentured servants in this
Right.
country versus having a lot of debt. I really wouldn't draw that analogy, but I know where you're going with the metaphor, which is, that
People are holding two or
have
three
been,
jobs
they
and-
have been, they have
Yeah.
literally, and you can't, I was talking to someone the other day who filed for bankruptcy. Just filed for bankruptcy. This was a, solidly middle-class guy, has a family, had a good-paying job, but it's like one thing after another. The economy is actually set up so that someone like a Lloyd Blankfein, someone who's born into money, someone who, has one of those, top 1% of the 1% of the 1% jobs, they barely have to do anything and they succeed.
Right.
And meanwhile, everyone else in this country is running as hard as they can, trying as hard as they can, working and working and working and working,
Tread
and
water, right?
still
Yeah.
not able to succeed.
Yeah.
At even a reasonable level. It's almost setting up. They may be too big to fail, but they're setting us up to fail.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
it's a
from
bad proposition.
childhood. They're giving, I got my first MasterCard in the mail when I was 16, which was unbelievable. And then,
Danger.
And it's been downhill ever since.
Yeah.
But also but now, with all of this Occupy stuff, it's really enlightened my sensitivity and my awareness. Like if you buy a car, you see that car everywhere. I've been noticing, if you walk around town, I've been noticing every ad on the subway, the buses, on the billboard, like everything is Citibank, Chase, this and that. Every single thing is a bank, MasterCard, Visa, even things that you don't think are banks are banks. They're the schools because of student loans. They're pushing student loans like crazy. We can get financing for this school, that school, the other school.
No, and I travel a lot around the country, and somebody recently pointed out to me, like, why is the biggest building in every downtown the bank?
The bank and
And
then
I
the
started
insurance
paying
company.
attention to that, and they're right. Right? I mean,
always.
it's a little, and it used to be the factories,
Right.
right?
Now there aren't any factories.
It used to be our, to some extent still we have universities, but I mean, it's a changing landscape, and it is, it's
The
sad.
bank, the insurance companies, then if there's a pharmaceutical company in town, and then the old church, which is abandoned, and they're trying to keep it, the 1929 building. They don't know what to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Hopefully they
crazy,
don't
but-
turn them into banks, although a lot of churches go the way of banks too.
Like you say, that's a whole nother show. So, well, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm
It's
sorry
been
we don't have more
great.
time. This
I
was
know.
great,
We'll
though.
have to do
Thanks
it
for
again.
having me on.
For sure, we'll have to do it again.
Fun conversation.
All right, thanks so much. All right, see you guys tomorrow.
Democratic government derives its just power from the people. But corporations do not seek consent to extract wealth from the people, and we are the 99%. We are the 99%. We are the 99%. And then no true democracy.
is actually to
Less regulation.
less regulation, less government, less restrictions, and to let the market sort of, that in fact the reason that these problems exist is because government has been intervening unfairly in the market. So that's the next step in the conversation, is really parsing that out. I'm a firm believer that it's the former. That, in fact, the reason we're in the predicament we're in is because we deregulated business, we deregulated the finance industry in particular, and let it do whatever the heck it wanted, and it did, and it destroyed us. But we have to have that conversation next as a country, and I think that's it's worth having.
I was thinking about this very thing this morning because I knew we were going to talk today, and I was thinking, and we're back. So, all right. So where were we? I wanted to ask you. Obviously, Americans know. They don't have to be told that we have problems with the current system. I mean, every American, I think, can see there are problems with the economy, with jobs, with corrupt banking, corrupt government. I mean, everybody on every side of every spectrum can see these things. What would you say? Do you think Americans need to know or understand that they don't?
That's an interesting sort of hypothesis you put forth, because in a way I think that was less true even 2 months ago, before the Occupy movement, the 99% movement. So the fact that we are now having
The conversation's changed.
a stronger conversation, the conversation certainly changed. We're all more facile in that conversation with the, what is the problem? It's inequality. What, is a result of that. So kudos to them for that, really. Where the, sort of one of my working hypotheses is that we're seeing a convergence of basically angry people in America, right? First you could have said it was the Tea Party, and you could say it's the Occupy movement. At the end of the day, it's not particularly red, it's not necessarily blue, but what they share is anger.
Right.
They share anger that the system isn't working.
Right,
now, if you sort of just get out of bed in the morning and, don't go read some books or talk to your neighbors or have some, don't have a particularly maybe well-formed critique of what's wrong, let alone a vision for what to do about it. But there is a sort of pit of their stomach, intuitive sense that's sweeping the country that something's just broken.
Right.
Now, there are two places where that falls out. So, so some people sort of would say, all right, it's really business, big business, Wall Street, the way our economy works, that's what's broken. Someone would say, it's really government that's broken. Now, I think most actually agree with both. So the sort of, on extremes, they would, but most people think it's both. You talk to Tea Party folks, you talk to Occupy Wall Street folks, they agree. Look, Wall Street is rigged, it's a rigged game, and they own government, which is why government built them out. Where the real breakdown then occurs, Bruce, is what you do with that. Because some people, right, and again, I think it sort of crosses partisan lines, some people say, well, the answer is you have to rein in business, and you have to make our economy work for working people and for entrepreneurs.
Right.
And that the only, if not the primary tool for doing that is government regulation, rules, restrictions, putting government back in the hands of people so that government can be a check and a balance to the market.
Right.
Then there are others, again, I think they cross spectrums, but there are others who say no, the solution